do a
So,
test.
okay, now we're recording. So I'm here today with Bobby, works at Equinix, and I have a few questions to ask for you just to learn more about your ethical perspective, your journey. First of all, I'm Jack, and what do you
Hey,
do?
Jack, it's very nice to meet you. Well, my name is Bobby Wynn, and I am currently a principal recruiter for a large technology company called Equinix. We own and operate data centers globally, and I've been in this position for about the last 10 years.
Okay. So um, so you do what do you do professionally exactly, and why did you choose or sorry, yeah, what do you do professionally, like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, at a high level, I help people find jobs within my company. Most of the time, I focus on sales roles. So I have conversations with prospective candidates that are looking to join Equinix, and I ask them questions about their background. And I try to find alignment between their skill set and the job that we are recruiting for within the organization.
Okay. So, do you mind if we just get into the questions that I want to ask for you today?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the first thing I have to ask you is what or who has the most influence in shaping your ethical outlook, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that probably my parents had the most influence on me. I think that, you develop an ethical framework at an early age, seeing how your parents treat people, how they interact with people who disagree with them, how they handle anger, um, how they handle failure, and ultimately how they take accountability when things are going well and maybe not so well in their life. I think that you can be influenced at an early age through a moral lens, and later in life, you wind up evaluating your ethical dilemmas using these inherited frameworks.
That's very interesting. So, you've gained more of an ethical outlook based on family experience more than your work experience, your jobs and all that. So you think family has a major um impact on your current ethical framework. And what do you think your current ethical framework is?
What do I think my ethical framework is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say that you always making the right decisions at the right times, right? So I think, and we can get into this a little bit, there's different ethical dilemmas that you'll face throughout your professional career and also within your personal life. And how you choose to react to those ethical dilemmas are very important. Sometimes you can get caught up, as an example, between loyalty and dissent. Are you going to be loyal to something that you really don't believe in? Or are you going to take a different route that makes more sense from an ethics perspective? And I can talk to you a little bit more about that, maybe some specific examples, but yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that after maybe I go and ask some of these important questions after you. But the next thing I have to say to you is what have been throughout your throughout your career, what have been your greatest ethical failures, and how might have you prevented them, or did you even want to prevent them to begin with? But what are some ethical failures you think you had in your past?
I'm not sure if I've had ethical failures. I've faced ethical dilemmas, and I can talk to you about how I've navigated that. I can tell you that as a principal recruiter at a large tech company, I work for a DEI-driven culture, and the dilemma that I sometimes find myself in, and have multiple times really have found myself in, is having to prioritize candidates from underrepresented groups to improve diversity metrics. So, you know, in a professional setting, I've actually been told point blank that we need to hire a woman or that we need to hire someone of color, for example. And
Have you
so the
seen,
ethical,
sorry.
yeah, so I was going to say the ethical tension here is between advancing equity and trying to correct historic disadvantages, and then also balancing that with risking actual unfairness to other candidates. So
Yeah.
sometimes it can be difficult to navigate that process, that hiring process with those types of pressures.
So in your experience, you've seen workers who are not DEI, they're better on average. Is that what you're saying? And because of that, the other workers you're giving like you have to there's a strict mandate to who you can hire and are they worse or would you say it hasn't had much of an impact on the actual output of the job?
Well, I think it's not a it's a matter of establishing, from my perspective, a fair process to make sure that the most competent and candidate is chosen for a position, transparently and fairly. So what you do is, or what I do is I focus on process integrity. So, as an example, I make sure that every job that I do a search for includes a diverse and non diverse state of qualified candidates, aligned stakeholders, and a very structured interview approach. So, I run a pre brief call with interviewers before the interviews take place. So we make sure and define competencies and question ownership. And then after the interviews are done, I schedule a debrief call to synthesize all of the feedback, challenge the biases, and make sure that everyone's aligned on skills and values. And that way, the candidate who advances to the next round or the final round or even to get the offer is chosen transparently and fairly based on merit and cultural fit.
So you would say your failure is that in the past you have allowed hired somebody that may or may not have deserved the job that you were giving out at a point of time.
Yeah, I would say that I've been put in that position, but I think I actually navigated it without actually failing my personal ethics. So,
Okay. Very interesting. Okay, let's get into the next question here. Can you describe a significant ethical dilemma you have faced and how you navigate it? I mean, that kind of plays in the way you said, but any other ethical dilemma you face and how you navigated it?
I can talk to you about ethical failures on a broader scope that I've viewed earlier on in my sales career that didn't necessarily have anything to do with me, but it was something that I was a part of. Earlier in my career, I worked in sales for a company called WorldCom, and Bernie Evers was the CEO of WorldCom, and he, as the CEO, deliberately participated in a scheme to inflate the company's financial performance to meet Wall Street expectations, actually to the tune of about $11 billion. So, kind of going back to my earlier point, sometimes from an ethics perspective, you're faced with loyalty versus dissent. And dissent was within the organization that I work for was treated as disloyalty. And some of the workers that chose dissent at WorldCom, so people that spoke up, were laid off, fired, and others risk everything to expose the fraud. So ultimately, the company was wiped out. Tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. Retirement savings were wiped out, including mine, and the stock went to zero. So,
Yeah.
how could it have been prevented? Maybe a stronger board, stronger internal controls, audit independence, and really important is protected whistleblower mechanisms. So, fun fact, based on what happened with WorldCom and also another well-known large corporate fraud called Enron, today's whistleblower protection acts are largely based on those, um, situations and circumstances.
So you would say that we're like kind of like learning from these failures and making new like bills regulation that is helping prevent this from happening ever again? Or would you disagree and say that maybe we should go in a different direction? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that at a high level, when things happen and when you see ethical failures in the corporate world, for example, that you always learn from it. And if you put in the right procedures and processes, especially within a corporate environment, then you hopefully can alleviate, some of the fraud that we've seen taking place in the past.
Okay, let's get into the last question here before we go over our time. What do you see as the greatest professional ethical crisis of today, and how can emerging professionals prepare to deal with it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. But there's a lot of technology today, and I think AI, you hear a lot about AI right now in the news. And I don't know if AI itself is really representative of an ethical crisis, but I think it can be um, potentially, for emerging professionals, be a concern, and in terms of maybe compromising their ethics. And I'll tell you why. Emerging professionals and young professionals are walking into corporate environments today where ethical compromise is really normalized as survival. So, as an example, AI-driven data. If you have a company that's relying on that to make the decisions, and a young professional comes in and says, "Hey," and they're told, "Hey, follow the systems," they're right, and you don't really know how to challenge that, and you don't understand how to challenge that. Well, the point is, you're still being morally implicated in those business outcomes. So, the way you could deal with it is maybe just by making sure you're asking questions, requesting human reviews, documenting all your concerns, and I think ultimately for an emerging professional or someone that's new to the corporate workforce, you have to uh, find yourself. It's important to work for a good company, but also a good manager. Managers that demonstrate the ability to explain decisions and welcome questions is very important, I think.
Yeah, I've definitely read that putting, all your marbles, all your trust into AI can definitely be a dangerous position to take and an ethical one. We've definitely discussed that in the class that I'm in. But yeah, thank you, Bobby, for letting me interview you. You provided a lot of insight on these new ethical perspectives, and it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks to
Bye.
you as well for the time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye
Talk
bye.
to you later. Bye.